My name is Lena Harris. I am 67 years old, and I died last spring. At least, that's what the paperwork said. I wasn't there when they decided it. I was in a hospital bed, unconscious after a stroke that had struck me like lightning on a quiet Thursday morning. I had just finished my tea, black with 1 sugar, like always, when the left side of my body gave out. The cup shattered on the floor. I remember my breath catching, like it was stuck in my chest. I remember darkness. When I woke up, I wasn't in my home. I wasn't even in the hospital. I was in a dim room that smelled like bleach and lavender. An end-of-life facility. The kind where the curtains are always half-drawn and people whisper like you're already gone. The nurse on duty gasped. "You're awake," she said, like it was a miracle. Maybe it was. I asked for a phone. She brought me a cup of water. It took 2 days for someone from the family to show up. My daughter, Claire, walked in holding a clipboard and a face full of practiced grief. She had tears in her eyes, but they stopped the moment I looked at her. "Mom, you weren't supposed to wake up," she said. "Supposed to?" She sat down. "The doctors said there was no brain activity. I signed the DNR. We made arrangements. I didn't think—" "You didn't think I'd come back, Claire. But I did. They had cleaned out my house, sold most of my things, shut down my bank account, changed the name on my land deed. I wasn't just presumed dead. I had been erased. The hardest part wasn't waking up to a life emptied out. The hardest part was realizing my own child had fast-forwarded the part where I was gone. I had 2 choices then: shrink into the void she made for me, or stand up and start again. I chose to stand. With trembling legs and anger running hot in my veins, I asked the nurse to find me a lawyer. I may have been half paralyzed. I may have had no address. But I was still Lena Harris. And I was going to remind them what that meant. They tried to write me off with a signature. But I had just found the pen. You'd think waking up from a stroke would earn you some sort of celebration. Flowers, balloons. A welcome back, Mom. But instead, I got silence, and the soft shuffle of feet that didn't expect me to be conscious. 2 nurses came in that morning whispering like I was still in a coma. One held a chart, the other a tray. When I said, "Good morning," the one with the tray dropped it. Scrambled eggs hit the floor like confetti at a funeral. "Mrs. Harris, you're awake?" "I was never gone," I replied, dry as dust. They apologized and rushed out. Moments later, Claire came in, flanked by a doctor with tired eyes. She looked like someone had poured fear and guilt into her coffee instead of cream. "Mom, listen, we were told—" "Told what? That I was dead? That it was okay to sign my name away like a used coat?" She blinked. Her voice was brittle. "It's what you would have wanted, if you knew." I stared at her. "But I do know, and I'm still here." She didn't answer that. She turned to the doctor and muttered something. I caught the word evaluation. Apparently, now that I wasn't dead, I had to prove I wasn't insane. I sat through 3 cognitive tests and 2 psychiatric assessments. They asked me to name the president, spell world backward, describe what I'd do if I found a stamped envelope on the street. I passed everyone. At the end, I asked the young psychiatrist, "Do people ever come back from the dead in your line of work?" She smiled softly. "Only the strong ones." When Claire came back, her eyes were colder. "You can't stay here, Mom. This place is full of patients who actually need the bed." "Then give me my house back," I said. "We sold it." 3 words. Simple, brutal, final. Apparently, the deed had been transferred 3 weeks after my stroke. Unclaimed estate, Claire called it. And the worst part? My land, my precious stretch of Maine coast, wasn't just sold. It was being developed into a resort. My garden, bulldozed. My porch, gone. You should rest, Mum. We'll find a place for you. Maybe something smaller, more manageable. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't panic or desperation. It was a decision. They had planned for my death and profited off it. But I wasn't dead, not even close. So I nodded, thanked Claire for the visit, and asked to borrow a phone. She left before I made the call. To a lawyer. The halls of the facility were too quiet. Not in a peaceful way, but in a holding your breath kind of way. Every sound, every footstep, every creak of a wheelchair echoed like a final thought. It was called Haven Pines, a name that tried too hard, the kind of place that dressed up death like it was something polite. But I wasn't dying, I was recovering, and I was angry. The morning after I requested a lawyer, I wheeled myself down the corridor using my good arm. I passed rooms with cracked doors, names taped onto the wood like labels on boxes. I wasn't a box. I wasn't done. I stopped at the community room. Inside, a few women were playing cards, the television playing a mute game show no one watched. They glanced at me, some with curiosity, some with sorrow. "Isn't she the one who woke up?" I heard one whisper. "Yes, that's me. The miracle? Or the inconvenience? Depends on who you ask." A kind nurse named Valerie brought me tea in a blanket that didn't smell like antiseptic. She sat with me while I explained everything, from the papers Claire signed to the house I lost. Her jaw clenched. "They do this more than you think," she said. "You weren't the first." "I plan to be the last," I told her. That afternoon, the lawyer called me back. His name was Marvin Dent, and he had the voice of a man who's seen too many sad stories and refused to let one more slip through. "They declared you legally incapacitated, Mrs. Harris, which means your daughter had power of attorney. Can I reverse it?" "That depends." "Can you sign your name?" "Watch me." We scheduled a meeting. Valerie helped me get dressed in something that didn't feel like a hospital shroud. I looked in the mirror. My face had thinned, my hair silvered more than I remembered. But my eyes, they were sharp, alive. I wasn't gone. When Marvin arrived, he didn't treat me like glass. He asked real questions, took real notes, and told me hard truths. "They'll fight you," he warned, "especially if there's money involved." "Good," I said. "Let them. Because here's the thing about people like Claire. They expect you to stay quiet, to fade, to bless their betrayals with silence. But I wasn't going anywhere. I had just started learning how to roar. They said it was just a house, a structure, a line of wood and nails with a view of the sea. But that house on the Maine coastline was never just anything. It was my heart wrapped in cedar shingles. It was where I kissed my husband for the first time under a leaking roof. Where I raised my son, taught piano lessons, and learned how to fix a garden faucet with nothing but a butter knife and prayer. It was the last piece of me that still stood after time and grief had taken so much else. And now? Bulldozed. Sold like a cheap trinket. I couldn't get the image out of my mind. Claire, standing in that garden where we once planted sunflowers together, signing contracts while I laid in a hospital bed with a breathing tube. The same hands that held mine as a baby, now scribbling away my life. I needed to see it for myself. Valerie, that angel of a nurse, pulled some strings, and arranged for an outing. Medical necessity, she winked. Mental health. The facility van dropped me off across from my old street. It took me a full minute to recognize it. Gone was the white fence I'd painted every spring. Gone was a little mailbox that had held birthday cards and final notices alike. In its place was a steel construction gate and a billboard that read, Whisper Bay Luxury Residences. Starting at $3.2 million. Luxury. For who? I rolled closer in my chair, ignoring the stares from construction workers. One of them approached. Ma'am, this is an active site. This was my land, I said, voice low but firm. I planted the lilacs. I built that porch. I watched the sea roll in from that swing. He looked uncomfortable. I'm just doing my job. So am I whispered. Because it was in that moment, surrounded by sawdust and betrayal, that I realized I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for myself, for every woman who's ever been erased politely, quietly, with a signature. Back at Haven Pines, I called Marvin. How far can we take this? He didn't hesitate. As far as you're willing to go. I stared out the window at the sky turning pink with dusk. The wind whispered like it used to on my porch. I want everything back, I told him. And if I can't have it, I want justice loud enough for the whole damn coastline to hear. The first article appeared in the Maine Coast Register 3 days after I filed the lawsuit. A tiny column buried beneath local fishing news and a bake sale flyer. But it was there. Elderly woman alleges fraud in family home sale. That's how they saw me. Elderly woman. As if my age was the story. Not the theft, not the betrayal, not the daughter who declared me too far gone while I was breathing on my own. But that was fine. I knew how these things worked. I used to write letters to editors when I was younger. I knew how to make people listen, especially when they'd rather not. So I called a reporter. His name was Nolan Bracey. Young, eager. A little unsure what to do with a woman who refused to whisper. I want my voice in print, I told him. Not in the obituaries. He came to Haven Pines that Thursday. I wore my best blouse, the one with the little pearl buttons. Valerie braided my hair. You're going to shake the dirt off this place, Lena, she said, grinning. I told Nolan everything. About the signature forged while I was sedated. About the power of attorney document Claire slipped through the court like a secret. About how I woke up and realized my name was no longer mine. It belonged to a trust she created behind my back. He asked, What do you want, Mrs. Harris? I looked him in the eye. Restoration, he blinked. Of what? The house? No, I said. Of me, of my name, my place, my dignity. That Sunday the story ran front page. Widows claims daughter sold coastal home behind her back. Subheadline. She thought I was dying. I wasn't. Suddenly, my phone, previously silent, lit up. Old students, neighbors, even the librarian who used to help me research Bach sonatas called to say, I saw your face, Lena. You're fighting. Yes, I was. But not just for me anymore. For every person whose voice was put in a drawer like an outdated will. For every elder reduced to a burden. For every woman whose silence was assumed. I wasn't just a widow, or a patient, or a mother with a broken heart. I was the storm they never saw coming. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp at the Cumberland County Courthouse. Marvin offered to pick me up, but I told him I wanted to go in the Haven Pines van. I wanted the whole world to see what they called a frail old woman rolling up to fight in full view. Valerie helped me dress. Navy blue blazer, soft grey scarf, and the pin Walt had given me on our 40th anniversary. "You look like a senator," she joked. I felt like a general going to war. Claire was already there when we arrived. Designer heels, slick ponytail, her face taut with anger. She didn't even look at me. Her husband, Gregory, had the nerve to smile at me, like I was a confused patient about to wander off. The judge was a stern woman named Lorraine DuPont. Middle-aged, sharp eyes. No time for pleasantries. "Ms. Harris, I understand you are contesting the sale of property formerly owned by you." "I am, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "And the theft of my name, my rights, and the assumption that silence equals consent." Claire's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client acted in the best interest of her mother. Medical records indicated diminished capacity." "With all due respect," I interrupted, "I may have been in a hospital bed, but I could still read a calendar, balance a checkbook, and quote the U.S. Constitution." There were chuckles in the gallery. The judge nodded. "I'll allow Miss Harris to continue." I explained everything. The unauthorized transfer, the forgery, the lies told under the pretense of love. Claire's attorney objected repeatedly, but Judge DuPont silenced him with one glare. "Let her speak." When I finished, the judge asked, "Do you believe your daughter thought you were dying?" "I believe she hoped I was," I replied. Gasps. "Not from me, from them. From the people who wanted me to wither, to disappear into comfortable silence." But I had cracked the silence open like a window in a stale room. Before adjourning, the judge announced, "A full investigation into the legitimacy of the power of attorney is now ordered. Temporary freeze on all assets connected to the sale. We will reconvene in 2 weeks." Claire's face went pale. Gregory's jaw twitched. "But me?" I smiled. Because for the first time in months, the system didn't treat me like a footnote. I had a microphone now, and I wasn't done talking. After the courtroom, Claire tried to do what she always did, rewrite the narrative. She called family friends, told them I was confused, senile, grasping at attention, said I was damaging her reputation and misremembering events. But what she didn't understand was, I have a memory like granite, and I've kept receipts, literal ones. I spent my evenings digging through an old trunk in my room at Haven Pines. Letters from the bank, copies of the home's deed, notes from Walt with dates listing repairs we had paid for over the years. And most importantly, a paper trail that showed I'd never once signed over power of attorney. Valerie helped me organize it all into folders. "They thought you were weak," she said. "But you're organized enough to run a corporation." "They'll wish I had," I replied. Nolan, the young reporter, came back for a follow-up. This time, he didn't ask me to repeat the tragedy. He wanted to hear about my life before all this. So I told him. I told him about the years I taught music to children who couldn't read sheet music, but could hum the entire melody after one listen. I told him about Walt and how we saved every penny to buy that house on the coastline. I told him about the time Claire cried in my lap because another girl called her plain. And I told her she had fire behind her eyes that could light up a city. She forgot who I was, I told Nolan, but I didn't. And then I said something that ended up as the headline. They tried to turn my history into a diagnosis, but I turned it into evidence. Claire and Gregory submitted a counterclaim. said I had moments of delusion, cited my fall from 2 years ago as proof I couldn't manage my affairs. But Marvin, bless that man, got me an independent psychiatric evaluation. The result? Miss Harris demonstrates full cognitive capacity and emotional insight. Translation: I knew exactly what I was doing, and they didn't like that one bit. The paper trail grew. The community started watching. And with each new page, each notarized form, each scribbled date from 20 years ago, I was reclaiming myself. Not through rage, not even through justice, through facts. Cold, unshakable, documented truth. And nothing makes liars sweat like a woman who can prove everything they hoped you'd forget. I wasn't expecting to hear Gregory's voice again so soon. But fate, or maybe poetic justice, delivered him to my ears in the least expected place. Right outside Haven Pines. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch with my coat zipped up and a warm cup of tea in my hands when a silver SUV pulled up. Gregory got out, holding an umbrella in one hand and tapping on his phone with the other. He didn't see me. He was pacing, muttering, clearly frustrated. Curiosity got the better of me. I set my tea down quietly and walked to the edge of the railing, hidden just enough by the lattice and the pouring rain. He had no idea I was listening. "She's digging through everything," he said into the phone. "Yeah, the old bat is smarter than she looks. She's got reporters sniffing around, and that damn judge is actually taking her side." There was a long pause. "No, Claire's a wreck. She didn't think she'd have to actually fight. She thought Lena would be, dead." I flinched. Not from the word, but from the casual cruelty. Like it was a grocery list item. Dead. Done. Handled. Then he said the words that turned my stomach. "We rushed it. Should have waited until the will was finalized." That was it. That was the slip. The admission. I stood up and took a step forward, making just enough noise that he looked up and locked eyes with me. His face went ghost pale. He stammered, "Lena, Mrs. Harris. I was just checking in. Claire wanted me to..." I held up my hand. "Save it. You already said enough." He drove off like a bat out of hell. I stood there, soaked, but steady. My pulse thudding not from fear, but purpose. That night, I wrote down every word I remembered. Valerie helped me transcribe it. Marvin promised to get the audio footage from the facility's security cameras. Even if there was no sound, Gregory's body language and presence could be corroborated. By morning, I had it all filed. Let me tell you something. People like Gregory think power is in bank accounts and silence. But real power, it's knowing the moment someone digs their own grave, then calmly writing down the time, date, and shovel type. When someone calls you paranoid, what they usually mean is, "You noticed something I hoped you wouldn't." And oh, I noticed everything. I had spreadsheets in my head, receipts in shoeboxes, and instincts honed by a lifetime of being the one who remembered the water bill when Walt forgot the faucet was leaking. After Gregory's little slip in the parking lot, I doubled down. Marvin encouraged me to request bank statements, credit histories, and property filings. We used Claire's name, Gregory's, and mine. What unraveled was more than betrayal. It was financial betrayal wrapped in entitlement. There were wire transfers I never authorized, a joint account I never signed for, property taxes paid under a trust I didn't know existed. They'd slowly, meticulously built a paper trail of control, hoping no one would ever follow it back upstream. But I did. Every birthday check I sent Katie that never arrived, deposited into Claire Family Holdings LLC. The $10,000 CD I'd opened with Walt to help Katie with college, cashed 6 months after my fall. My name removed from the Coastal House's insurance policy, 3 weeks after Gregory convinced me to sign routine maintenance forms. They called me paranoid when I asked questions. Don't worry about it, Mom. You're imagining things. Let us handle it. Let me tell you something. When someone insists you stop looking, it's because they're hiding something worth seeing. One night I sat with Valerie at the kitchen table and traced it all out with a yellow highlighter. I drew arrows, connections, names, dates. At the end of it all, she looked up and whispered, "This isn't just shady. This is elder fraud." Marvin confirmed it. He started preparing the case for criminal court. But he also asked the big question. "Lena, are you sure you want to go all the way?" I looked at him and said, "Gregory and Claire already buried me once in their heads. I'm just doing what ghosts do best, haunting the guilty." They thought the money trail would go cold, but they forgot who handled the books when Walt opened his first bait shop. They forgot who balanced the checkbook with one eye on the oven timer. They forgot who saved every tax return since 1979. I didn't forget. And now, every penny they stole would come back with interest, both financial and comic. It was early morning when Claire showed up. Not the usual smug version. No. This Claire was flustered, wearing yesterday's makeup and a scarf tied too tight, like she was trying to hold herself together. Her heels clicked nervously against the tiled floors of Haven Pines as she walked in like someone who didn't belong anymore, but hadn't realized it yet. I was in the common area playing a slow game of Scrabble with Miss Dottie when I saw her. She waved, a little too eagerly, and I excused myself with a nod. Dottie didn't say a word, but I swear she gave me a look like, "Go get her." Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lena, I thought we could talk. Privately." I led her to the small tea room down the hall. No cameras, no visitors. Just the two of us and a chipped ceramic kettle humming on its warmer. She started with her favorite script. "This has all been a misunderstanding. Gregory got carried away. I should have stepped in sooner." I sipped my tea. "Of course we were going to bring you home. You were just so fragile. We didn't want to upset you." Sip. "And the house. It's in a trust, yes. But that was temporary. We can fix this, Lena. Just stop pushing. It's embarrassing. For everyone." I set my cup down, folded my hands, and looked her dead in the eyes. "You called me dead, Claire. In writing." She blinked. "What?" "You filed a death benefits claim. Life insurance. You forged my physician's signature." Her face froze. The silence between us thickened. "I was unconscious, not gone. You thought a fall meant a funeral. That was your mistake." She stood. "You don't want to do this, Lena. Think of Katie. Think of the family." I smiled. And I think that's what scared her most. I am. I'm thinking about the example I set, about the legacy I leave, about what Katie will learn from all this. Claire turned on her heel and stormed out. But she made one last mistake. She paused at the doorway and muttered, "You should have stayed quiet." I stood and walked right behind her. "And you should have remembered I was a public speaking teacher for 32 years. That day, I filed the final affidavits. Marvin smiled like a man who knew justice had already begun. They tried to strip me of my voice, but now they would hear me. in courtrooms, in newspapers, in every corner of this town. Lena Harris was no longer silent. And silence had never suited me anyway. The courthouse smelled like fresh paper and stale coffee. I sat in the front row, not because I wanted to be seen, but because I wanted to see everything. The judge, the lawyers, the faces of Gregory and Claire as their story unraveled piece by piece. Gregory wore a navy blazer like it might shield him from consequences. Claire had on pearls and silence. Neither of them looked at me. I think they hoped I'd look frail, fragile, maybe forget where I was. But instead, I wore the same brooch Walt gave me the day he opened our second shop. A golden heron, wings outstretched. A reminder, I was still flying. My lawyer Marvin stood tall, calm and unflinching. He presented everything: dates, statements, signatures, the transfer trail, the forged authorization on the home deed, even the voicemail Claire left my neighbor, calling me deadweight. The courtroom listened as the tape played, my daughter-in-law's voice saying, "She's old. She won't know the difference." My hands didn't shake. Not once. Then came their defense. Miscommunication. Concern. Overwhelmed by responsibility. Gregory even cried. But the tears didn't match the tone of the emails he'd written about securing her assets before she goes senile. The judge was a woman. Middle-aged, sharp. She didn't blink once during the recordings. At one point, I caught her looking at me, not with pity, but with something that felt like recognition, as if she, too, had known what it meant to be underestimated. And when I stood to testify, the room went silent. I was not confused, I said. I was not incompetent. I was just inconvenient. And they didn't want to wait for nature to run its course. So they tried to erase me early. Legally, financially, emotionally. I looked directly at my son. I gave birth to you. I carried you. And when your father passed, I carried everything else too. You don't erase someone like me. You don't get to. Gregory lowered his eyes. Claire didn't move. When I finished, the judge nodded. No gavel, no drama, just the sound of truth settling into the bones of that room. Outside the courthouse, the wind caught the hem of my coat. Valerie was waiting with the car. She looked at me and smiled. "You didn't bury them?" she said. "You just turned on the light." I thought the courtroom might feel like my funeral. But as I walked out, head high, spine straight, I realized something. It wasn't mine. It was theirs. The local paper didn't even ask for an interview. They just printed it. Page 4, beneath a story about a farmer's market opening early for spring. But there it was, plain as day. Elderly woman wins case against family in property theft scandal. They didn't use my name in the headline, but everyone in town knew. I got my groceries delivered the next morning, and the young man said, "You're her, aren't you?" I didn't have to answer. He handed me the bag with a smile that said it all. The article itself was just facts. A woman, 67, misled into signing over property rights, declared legally competent by the court, successfully reclaimed full ownership of her estate. Her son and daughter-in-law under investigation for elder abuse and fraud. No dramatics, no quotes. But that little article had a big echo. Valerie printed out 5 copies and pinned one to the staff board at Haven Pines. Miss Dottie folded it into her crossword book like a sacred bookmark. Even Marvin sent me a message. "I've seen big headlines do less damage than this one small truth." I got letters, real ones, in envelopes, from women I didn't know. One from New Hampshire. They tried to take my name off our home too. I thought I was alone. Thank you. Another from Georgia. You reminded me to ask more questions, to read before I sign. You gave me courage. And one note, no return address. Loud suits you. It felt like the wind was changing. Like I had thrown open a window in a room that had been stale for decades. Other women were breathing deeper now. Because if Lena Harris could speak up after almost being declared dead, maybe they could too. The thing about truth, it spreads. Quietly at first, then boldly, then unstoppably. One morning I passed Claire in the pharmacy parking lot. She ducked behind a row of carts. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. My power wasn't in confrontation anymore. It was in existence. In the way my name now meant something again. Not just to me, but to others like me. I kept the article folded in my purse like armor. Not because I needed protection, but because it reminded me who I had become. A woman who would never again let silence define her. It arrived in a pink envelope, covered in heart stickers and one smiley face with uneven eyes. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Well, the lack of it. The letters were big, blocky, and sometimes backward. Katie. I sat down on my porch with the letter, my heart thudding like I'd just run uphill. I opened it slowly, like unwrapping something fragile. Inside was a sheet of construction paper, folded twice and smelling faintly of fruit snacks. It read, "Dear Grandma Lena, I miss your pancakes and the way you sing in the car. Daddy says you are on a long trip, but I saw your face in the paper. Mommy said not to write you, but I wanted to. I hope you're not mad. Love. Katie, Heart Ladybug Yarn Rainbow." I read it once, then twice, then held it against my chest and cried. Not because I was sad, but because this tiny letter cut through all the noise. All the courtrooms and lawyers and property lines and betrayal. It was simple, pure, from the only person in that entire house who had seen me as I really was. Her grandma. Not a burden, not a bank account, not an inconvenience. Just Grandma Lena, who made blueberry pancakes and hummed old Dolly Parton songs at stoplights. She hadn't forgotten. I didn't write back right away. I sat with that letter for a few days, carried it in my pocket, reread it before bed. I wanted my reply to matter. So I bought a box of fancy stationery, cream-colored, gold-trimmed, and wrote her back in my neatest cursive. I told her I missed her too. That singing in the car wasn't the same without her voice chiming in. That I was okay, strong, happy even. I didn't mention the court or her parents or anything dark, just light. Then I tucked a small origami crane inside, folded from one of my old teaching worksheets. On its wings I wrote, "You are braver than they know." I mailed it to her school, care of the counselor. No return address, just a silent promise between us. Katie was the only good thing that had come from Gregory and Claire, and I would not let their darkness touch her, not if I could help it. That letter reminded me what I was fighting for, not revenge, legacy. When the courts restored everything, the bank called me 3 times to confirm the transfer. "Mrs. Harris," the manager said cautiously, "it's quite a large amount to be placed back into your account." I almost laughed. Yes, it is, I thought. Because they almost got away with it. I stared at the balance on the screen that afternoon, numbers blinking back at me like ghosts returned from the grave. Gregory and Claire had planned to drain it dry. New cars, a remodeled kitchen, maybe even a beach house they'd never let me visit. But now it was back, every cent, and it felt like justice had a weight, a gravity, a gold-plated echo saying, "You still matter." I didn't splurge. I didn't take off on a cruise or buy jewelry or fill my closet with cashmere. That's not who I am. Instead, I walked to Haven Pines and handed a sealed envelope to the receptionist. Inside was a check that would cover the cost of 3 months' rent for a woman on the waiting list. Someone like me, but without the benefit of a headline. I didn't put my name on it. I didn't need the glory. Next, I visited a small non-profit downtown, Women Rising, they called themselves. Run by 2 sisters who'd been through the system, chewed up by it, spit out, and still decided to fight for others. I told them I wanted to set up a quiet fund. "Not in my name," I said. "But why not?" the older sister asked. "Because this isn't about me," I replied. "It's about what happens after." I also hired a young lawyer, fresh out of school, full of nerves and fire. I told her my story and asked if she wanted to represent women like me. "I can't pay you a salary forever," I said. She smiled. "Just the first chance is enough." Then I did one more thing. A small thing, really. I bought back the old piano that Gregory sold during renovations. The one Walter'd saved up for. The one Katie used to plink away on while I baked. I placed it by the window in my little rental house, next to a vase of wildflowers. I played a few notes. My fingers were stiff, but they remembered. They couldn't steal my money. They couldn't steal my name. And now, they couldn't steal my future. It was a Thursday. Bright but cold. The kind of morning where the sun tricks you into thinking it's warm until the wind smacks you in the face. I wore my best navy coat. The one with the silver buttons Walt always said made me look presidential. I took a deep breath outside the restaurant doors, the same ones I'd been turned away from months earlier. But this time, there was no uncertainty in my chest, only fire. The same host was there, still slicked back hair, still looking like he measured people's worth by their shoes. He didn't recognize me. That pleased me more than it should have. "Good afternoon," he said with a fake smile. "Good afternoon," I replied, my voice calm, clear. "I have a meeting with the owner." He hesitated, glanced at his tablet. "Name? Lena Harris." Still, his brow furrowed. "Are you sure it's today?" I leaned slightly closer. "Very sure." Moments later, the manager came rushing out. "Mrs. Harris! So good to finally meet in person," he exclaimed, shaking my hand like I was royalty. I watched the host's face change as realization crept in. He wasn't just dismissive anymore. He was sweating. "You'll have to excuse the confusion," he muttered. I smiled. "Oh, I don't mind. People misjudge all the time." We toured the place. The kitchen needed an update, the staff a morale boost, and the menu? Well, it was tired. But it had potential, just like I did. I didn't buy the restaurant for revenge. Not really. I bought it because I wanted to build something. A place where no one, no woman, no senior, no struggling mum with kids, would be turned away for looking less than. That evening, we signed the paperwork in a quiet back booth. I asked for one final clause to be added. "I want Thursdays to be no judgment day," I said. "Anyone can eat. No dress code. Pay what you can." The lawyer blinked. "That's highly unconventional. So is surviving the worst day of your life and choosing not to become bitter." When I walked out, the wind didn't feel cold anymore. My coat flapped behind me like a cape. I hadn't just entered the restaurant. I'd rewritten the rules. The grand reopening was simple. No red carpet, no cameras, no press releases. Just fresh flowers on every table. Handwritten menus, and a warmth in the air that had nothing to do with the kitchen. I sat near the window where sunlight hit just right around 1 p.m. I didn't want to be the center of attention, but I did want to be present. I wanted to feel what I had built. People trickled in slowly at first. A young mum with twin toddlers, an older couple holding hands, a man in paint-stained overalls who looked surprised anyone even let him in. No one was rushed. No one was judged. They were welcomed, seen. Then a server approached my table and said, "We have something for you." Out came a plate I hadn't ordered. Just a bowl of vegetable soup and 2 slices of buttered bread. "It's from our new gratitude menu," she said. "Inspired by you." I looked down and my breath caught. It wasn't the food, it was a memory. Walt used to make that soup. Every Sunday, same spices, same slightly too thick carrots. It was his favorite recipe from his mother. I hadn't tasted it since the day before he died. I took a spoonful and it hit me like a wave. Not just the flavor, but the weight of everything. Of being forgotten, of being fought for, of winning, of still being here. My eyes filled. Right there in the middle of my own restaurant, I cried. Not loud, just tears slipping quietly while the sun warmed my face. A little boy at the next table saw me. "Are you sad?" he asked. I wiped my cheek and smiled. "No, honey, I'm remembering something beautiful." His mom reached over and touched my hand. "Thank you for this place," she said. "We needed it." I nodded, unable to speak. There was a time I would have apologized for crying in public, would have hidden my emotions like shame. But now I knew that pain wasn't weakness. It was memory. It was proof of a heart that had survived. I didn't apologize. I smiled. I picked up my spoon, and I kept eating. It was late, the kind of quiet only the ocean can offer. Steady, heavy, almost sacred. I had just locked up the restaurant and was sipping tea by the front window when the bell above the door jingled. We were closed, but I knew that silhouette before I saw the face. Claire. She stood in the doorway like she was waiting for permission to exist. Hair pulled back too tight, expensive shoes too clean for a walk this late. The woman who once sneered at my coat now couldn't look me in the eye. "Hi, Lena," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded toward a chair. "You're lucky I didn't change the locks." She sat. Silence stretched between us. I let her fidget. Let her avoid the question in the air. Let her stew in the memory of what she'd said to me that day. "This isn't your kind of place. I wanted to talk," she finally said. "I saw the papers about the sale. I didn't know that I had money," I said, "or that I had worth." She flinched. "Good." She pulled something from her purse. A resume. "I was let go. Downsized. And, well, you're hiring." The audacity. But I didn't raise my voice. Didn't laugh. Didn't rage. Instead, I leaned forward and asked, "Why would I hire someone who looked me in the face and decided I was invisible?" Claire looked down. "Because I was wrong." That was something, but not enough. I thought about the women who'd walked through my doors in the last few weeks. Survivors, fighters, forgotten ones. I thought about the kindness I wished someone had extended to me at my lowest. And then I asked her the one question she didn't expect. "Can you wash dishes?" She blinked. "What?" "We're full-on managers. But I need a night dishwasher. Pays minimum." Aprons in the back. Her face went pale, but then she nodded. I'll take it. That night didn't end with hugs or forgiveness. It ended with her behind the kitchen sink and me in the office, staring out at a dining room filled with laughter. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to rewrite the ending. And sometimes that meant giving people the chance to clean up the mess they made with their own hands. I never planned to be a headline. I never dreamed of being known beyond my own block, my own family, my own quiet corner of Maine. But life, it turns out, loves an underdog, especially one who refuses to stay under. The call came 2 weeks after Claire started scrubbing pots. A journalist from the Maine Sunday Times said someone had tipped her off. Probably one of the regulars. She wanted to do a feature on the older woman who turned a public humiliation into a local miracle. I laughed when she said that. Miracle. Number, just work. Just knowing I was worth more than how they treated me. We met on the boardwalk outside the restaurant. She asked questions, took notes, took photos of me leaning against the railing with the ocean behind me. At one point, she asked, "What kept you going?" I didn't have a fancy answer. I just said, "I remembered who I was before they told me to disappear." The piece went viral. Not that I cared about all that, but it brought something unexpected. Letters, emails, strangers dropping by the restaurant with stories of their own. A widow from Arkansas who'd been pushed out by her kids. A retired librarian from Illinois who lost everything in a divorce. A veteran who'd been sleeping in his car. They all said the same thing. You reminded me that it's not over. And then the nickname started circulating. Coastal Grandma with Grit. Someone printed it on a mug. Someone else made a tote bag. A local boutique asked if they could feature my outfits. I just wear cardigans, I told them. They called it minimalist elegance. I didn't let it go to my head. But I didn't hide either. I started giving talks at community centers. I showed up to city council meetings and asked where the funding for seniors had gone. I helped organize a weekly lunch at my restaurant for anyone over 65. No charge. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was leading, and people were following, all because someone once told me to stay quiet. And I decided to do the opposite. I was dusting the bookshelf in my small upstairs office above the restaurant when I found the envelope. It had slipped behind a row of old cookbooks. Must have fallen years ago. My hands froze when I saw the handwriting. Walt. The envelope was sealed, slightly yellowed. On the front, it read, "For Lena, when you're strong enough." My knees went weak. I sat down, the past rushing back like a tide. Walt had passed almost 10 years ago. Gentle, stubborn, quiet Walt, always putting others first. Always believing in me, even when I couldn't. I opened the letter carefully. Inside, in his familiar slanted print, was a single page. My Lena. If you're reading this, it means you finally saw yourself the way I always did. Capable, courageous, unstoppable. I worried that when I went, you'd let them shrink you. But I also knew, deep down, you were meant to rise. That's why I set something aside. In a trust, in your name. I kept it hidden, because I wanted you to reach it, not in desperation, but in triumph. There's a key in the back of this letter. Safety Deposit Box 204 at First Shore Bank. What's inside is yours. No strings. Use it to build, to breathe, to fly. Love always, Walt. My eyes blurred. My heart thudded. I turned the letter over and sure enough, taped to the back was a tiny silver key. That afternoon, I walked to the bank with trembling hands. The clerk took me to the vault and opened the box. Inside was a folder with account papers and a certified check. A staggering sum, more than I ever dreamed of holding. And tucked beneath it, a photo of Walt and me on our anniversary. He'd written on a back, "For every time they told you no, say yes." That night I sat by the ocean, pen in hand, and wrote my last letter to him. "Walt, you were right. I forgot for a while, but I remember now. I've done more than survive. I've become someone I'm proud of. Thank you for seeing me, even when I was invisible to myself. I'm going to keep building, Walt. For me. For others like me. You didn't just leave me money. You left me permission to live fully. And I'm finally doing it. Love forever, Lena." The sun rose slow over the Atlantic that morning, gilding the waves in gold. Seagulls cried, flags flapped along the marina. And the restaurant, my restaurant, buzzed with the last-minute touches. It had taken months of paperwork, renovations, and quiet persistence. But today was the grand opening of Lena's shoreline. We didn't just serve food. We served dignity. Every Thursday, seniors ate free. Every Saturday, young mothers were welcome to take home prepared meals. I hired local teens after school and paid them a wage that meant something. My chef, a woman who'd been fired at 60 for being too slow. My hostess, Claire, who now greeted guests with the grace of someone who knew what rock bottom looked like. Out front, I stood with my cardigan pressed and my hair curled, holding a big pair of scissors. The mayor was there. The paper sent a photographer. But what mattered most were the faces in the crowd. Familiar, grateful, hopeful. A ribbon stretched across the porch. I smiled. For every woman who's been told she's too old, too poor, too tired, this is for you. Snip. The ribbon fell. Inside, people clapped and cheered. Some cried. A little boy tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Are you the lady who bought the ocean?" I laughed. "Just a small piece, sweetheart." That night, I sat out back on the little bench overlooking the water. The wind carried salt and stories. I looked up at the stars and spoke softly. "You were right, Walt. They couldn't scatter me. I was never ash. I was fire." I thought about the girl I once was. Afraid to speak, quick to shrink, trained to please. Then I thought about Lena Harris now. 67 years old, survivor, business owner, community leader. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just had to stand. And now others were standing with me. The coast wasn't just mine. It was for every woman who thought her story was over. And I was just getting started.